morning. I'm going to wait 30 seconds and maybe I'll just start talking slowly while people come. You know, nobody told me that when you are at a conference across from Disneyland that you shouldn't wear sneakers on stage. So I apologize. You know, I forgot to put on my party shoes when I left the hotel today. But this is great because we are going to have a great walk through innovation on this panel, and I'm very excited about it. My name is Sue Tierney. My day job is as a senior advisor at Analysis Group, headquartered in Boston. And I've been involved in the electric industry regulation, policy, transitions for many, many, many decades. It's really exciting to be here at this conference, but also to moderate this panel where we have some of the most capable and strong leaders in different domains in this industry. They are from different domains, and we're going to hear different vantage points over the next hour. You have their bios, and please take a look because I'm not going to give their introductions any due credit. They're really incredible human beings. First is Matt Peterson. He is CEO of the LA Clean Incubator. He drove all the way from LA, so that was a long drive, we know. And he has a long career, even though he's a pretty young guy, he has a long career in sustainability and in public and private partnerships. Next is Mariana Vayman, way down at the other end. And she is the CEO of VNR Energy. She is a leader in software solutions for the power industry, and she is a member of the IEEE. So it's great to have one member up here on the panel. Next is Vice Admiral Anne Rondeau, who is now the president of the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, and she drove from Monterey, not a small feat, so thank you very much. She has a multi-decadal career in the Navy, and as I mentioned, I think you're the first Vice Admiral that I have met, so it's nice to meet you. And finally, Peter Fox-Penner. I think Peter is one of the genuine thought leaders in our industry. His career spans academia, government, consulting. He's an author of some pretty important books on the electricity transitions, and he is now at Energy Impact Partners. And so we're going to dig in. I am not saving time for audience questions, so you can kind of throw tomatoes at me if you'd like, but we have a lot to cover in not very much time, so let's begin. Matt, as I mentioned, you have worked today at the incubator with a lot of public partnerships. And by the way, yes, I forgot to mention that our theme is innovation, so you'll see that picked up. But of course, that was the theme of all of the panels in some sense. But we're going to be talking about innovation in particular across the broad range of topics that have been touched on during the convention. So Matt, you want to tell us about where you see things going from your vantage point?
Sure. Thank you so much. It's great to be here and with such a great esteemed panel. Appreciate being invited to be on the stage. So the LA Clean Tech Incubator is an organization, a nonprofit that is in the Arts District. We have a beautiful campus that's actually owned by the Department of Water and Power. We're honored and blessed to be the stewards of this innovation campus owned by the city and the Department of Water and Power. And we really try to bring together innovation, thought leadership, policy leaders, capital allocators, utilities, to see how can we advance towards an inclusive green economy, and in this case, really towards 100% clean power, along with meeting the needs, of course, of transportation electrification, building decarbonization, then you add in AI, data centers, and so much more. But we're focused on transportation electrification, building decarb, and clean energy, along with, of course, reliability. And we incubate startups, so we look at opportunities for early stage companies to come in and figure out how can we help them pilot solutions. Thanks to the state legislature, we have some flexible dollars we provide them for piloting of their solutions. And then we're really looking for, as we've launched in the last couple of years, major partnerships on a regional-wide basis with Southern California Edison, Department of Water and Power, the Mayor of Los Angeles, the county, other local utilities in the region, and private sector leaders. How do we really accelerate the progress towards when the world arrives, not just the IEEE, but when the world arrives for the 2028 Olympics? And of course, we have the World Cup in 2026 before that, the Super Bowl in 2027 in Los Angeles. So we've got some big events and some big power loads to deliver. And more importantly, how do we use the Olympics in particular as a catalyst? How do we really advance progress through a public-private partnership, through collaboration and innovation? And we've been, as we set and launched our roadmap last October of how do we increase and accelerate the reduction in GHGs and air pollution in the region through, again, meeting the needs of building decarb and transportation electrification and ensuring reliability. So we're looking at things like with Southern California Edison and Pasadena Water and Power, for example, on how do we put in a VPP? The region, we've seen virtual power plants, of course, but how do we really make sure we're not only getting DERs deployed and figuring out how we get them interconnected faster, particularly with charging and heavy-duty truck charging, which we're very involved in with the ports of LA and Long Beach. How do we do that at speed and scale? I mean, and innovation utilities are often, at loggerheads because of the need to provide reliability and certainty and safety. And so we're really trying to figure out how we do that while looking at early stage innovation, figuring out how we do business model integration. What do we do to pivot and iterate along the way to see what works? How do we do really advanced flexible interconnection, things that I'm sure have been on the minds and in these conversations in these hallways the last few days. And so we're really figuring out how we work together. And where we bring in early stage innovation is always the challenge, particularly at utility scale. So we do simple things like how to do business with Department of Water and Power, how to do business with Southern California Edison, or in other contexts, how to do business with companies like United Airlines, and take companies out to decision makers and show their wares, figure out what it is that they have to offer, see what is available to pilot, and then look at what we can do to scale these solutions. And there's so much work to do, of course, so much power load that is needed, and how are we going to get it to where it's needed in a timely manner is really top of mind for us, as I know everybody in this room. And if you want to be part of this collaboration in the region, you don't have to be utility-based in this area. We have lots of other private sector partners. Please let us know. We're really looking to figure out how we use these next 4 years as this sense of unique opportunity. As LA and California are on the leading edge, of course, of so many things, while we're learning from other places through some of the leadership here on this panel. So really just excited to begin this conversation here today.
Very cool. Thank you. Mariana, I'm going to turn to you next. And Matt talked about a bunch of transitions, and you're involved in software on analytics, controls, and so forth on the grid. You want to talk about how you see innovation in that area?
Sure, and I want to say that I'm very excited to be on this panel. I'm also from Los Angeles, so the West Coast dominates, Southern California dominates.
Okay, I'm from Redlands, just so you know.
So looking at what happens in our industry right now, I think the title of our panel should rather be a flame of innovation or fire of innovation rather than just a spark of innovation. Considering that electrification is one of the key components of industry transformation that is so needed to meet our decarbonization goals, innovation should be addressed in a holistic way, and having a multidimensional approach with multiple axes of innovation probably would be the way to go, and those innovative axes are electrification, IBR integration, extreme event forecasting and addressing extreme events, cyber and physical security, artificial intelligence, and workforce development. And having this in mind, then interoperability and various interdependencies become so important in various technologies, including software. For example, interdependencies between transmission and distribution grid. We have never seen reverse power flows in the past, but now it's became a new norm. The synergy between transportation and electric utilities industry. This is a new novel synergy that we're experiencing right now. Interdependencies between IT, communications, systems and power systems. That existed for decades, but now with so many new data points and so many new measurements coming into place, this interdependency has to be redefined. And there are so many innovative solutions that could be mentioned that I could not fit into several minutes, so I'll mention just a few. Number one, and they're not in the order of priority, is distribution system real-time situational awareness, monitoring, and control. This is very cool, this is very new, this is very exciting. And for example, in the previous session, PMU state estimator was mentioned by ComEd. So for example, V&R Energy is the company that actually deployed that distribution PMU state estimator a couple of months ago at ComEd's Bronzeville Community Microgrid. The next one, I would say, integrated transmission, distribution, and resource planning. If we want to accommodate for the load growth that we have been talking for the past 3 days, we cannot avoid integrated generation, transmission, distribution, and resource, not generation, but resource planning. The next one I think is extremely important, is to consider EV charging load for dynamic studies. We currently address this load as steady state. If we should develop accurate and adequate dynamic models, expand composite load model to account for EV model if we want to correctly plan and operate the system in a reliable, stable, and resilient way. Forecasting methodologies and tools, weather forecasting, load forecasting, in order to prevent and predict extreme events that might potentially lead to cascading outages. Grid enhancing technologies, we've talked a lot about them, at least as a temporary solution, and we are very involved in them to mitigate congestion and other violations. But what I want to mention now from V&R's perspective, and the company has long multi-decade history of innovation and bringing new technologies and software tools to the utility industry. The key factor that we learned out throughout the years is to make an innovative solution a reality, is having a champion or champions in the utilities that would take the risk and tremendous effort to implement those innovative ideas. We have a bunch of them. We'd like to have those champions and pioneers to bring them to reality. So I'll stop here.
Thank you. Anne, I'm going to turn to you next. You have many years of work directly with the Navy, so a very large energy customer. And you also now, in your personal and professional life, have a lot of affiliations with entities in this industry. From your vantage point, what's this spark or the flame of innovation look like for you?
Well, first of all, thank you. And to the IEEE folks here, thank you. You are in this room kind of the collective genius of the future of America and the world. And so I would say to you that this conference is really important, and the networking that you're doing will get us to the integration that we need. So my background was 38 years in the Navy and all the things that would imply. And then I had the opportunity to be the college president of College of DuPage outside Chicago, which is a very large two-year school that does everything from the trades, of course, then to pre-college. And I'll tell you a quick story there. But my other reason here for being here is the privilege of being able to be on board service for Quanta. And I want to thank Shay for this invitation, because in all those things, what is the bridge from the Navy to my current job at Naval Postgraduate School to my previous jobs over in at the College of DuPage was IEEE and the world that you have and that you are. Because at some point, you're all about the application and the operationalization of energy and of things that are really important. So for that purpose, and I want to say very clearly, in this chair, I do not speak for Quanta, nor do I speak for the United States Navy or the Department of Defense. That might be impossible to do, actually. So I want to be very clear that I come with my own personal honor of privilege of service. But when I was at the College of DuPage, I went down to the auto mechanics shop one day, and I'm going down there and talking to students. And I talked to this guy. You know, his hands are dirty, but he's learning about auto mechanics. But he's at a computer, and he said, I had no idea I would first have to learn about computers before I went and learned about the mechanics of a car. And his comment was, this is a new world. And so that is in a microcosm what I am working with now, and what I would say that we are working with is that this is a new world. The panel ahead of us talked about the excitement of the time. I completely agree with that. It is extraordinarily exciting. But with more and more activity and dynamism and excitement comes risk, comes some concerns about other things. So in my current job, we teach at the master's and PhD level, as well as at the certificate and badging level, graduate level work in all of the STEM areas of the Navy and the Marine Corps and of DoD. But we also do it very much in mind about a number of things: risks, gaps, opportunities, and then really looking at not only the immediate issues, but also the issues of 5, 10, and 30 years from now, because you have to be able to do that in order to understand things. But what that means is that we recognize even more the interdependencies of everything that is around us, and then that adds to the complexity. So you think about what Duke was talking about, the uncertainty of things, and having to plan not just 9 years in advance, but 10, 20, or 30. That's what we do in my current job, but that's what you all are doing now, is really looking at that hard. So I want to thank you, because I read your stuff. About a third of my faculty, maybe half, are IEEE members. They've written for all of you. They've done the research for all of you. I've got fellows from IEEE on my staff. So when I told them that I was coming here, they were very excited for a number of reasons. One is that I had to read more of their stuff, but also because they thought this was a great opportunity for the nexus of what is in the public side of our national security and global goodness with the industry giants that are making the utilities of the future something that we all can depend upon. I'll stop there, but that's where I am.
Thank you, Ann, and that is a great shout out for the IEEE. That's great. So Peter is also an engineer, and and a bunch of other things as well. From your vantage point these days at the Energy Impact Partners, did I get it right? You see innovation every day. You see startup companies, people who are trying to break out with new things and systems and so forth. So what's your outlook on all of this and the importance of innovation? A simple question.
Well, a simple answer, innovation's absolutely, utterly essential to basically solving all of the world's many problems, not least of which is the clean energy transition. So, next question? No, just kidding. First of all, I want to say thank you to Eric Takayasu, wherever you are, who first called me to be on this. As soon as I found out Sue was going to be the head of it, is another reason to say yes. We've been working together for many decades at the Department of Energy at DOE headquarters on 1000 Independence Avenue. You've all seen it. Her office was quite appropriately directly above mine, like the next floor up. But she's right. I've kicked around for a long time and still consult with the Brattle Group. But now at Energy Impact Partners, we have a very, I think, unique organization in the innovation space. And it's basically a clean energy investment platform where the investors are, it's a strategic coalition of 60 companies, many utilities and other energy companies and large industrials worldwide. And many of you are here. Quanta's one of our investors. Many of you work with or for our investors, and I want to say thank you. And we also, so with this strategic coalition, we invest in innovations and startups and fast-growing companies along the entire spectrum of clean energy transition. We have everything from a fusion company to many wires companies, smart grid in-home the sensor that's soon going to be in Landis+Gyr. It's already now in Landis+Gyr meters. We have 100 companies across the entire innovation space. And our sort of theory of innovation, you might say, our theory of accelerating innovation, our theory of change in the impact and ESG language, is that when you get innovators, startup folks who have some expertise and some idea and a start but need to scale in the room with folks like you. We do 25 working groups a year on very specific topics, and we go to each of our 60 industrial experts, say Duke Energy, and we say, we want to do a session on distribution system software, strictly on that. Send us your experts from your engineering staff on distribution software. We'll get in the room. We'll bring in 5 companies that have innovations in distribution software. We should probably bring in Mariana on that session. We're going to hear from them. It's almost like a Shark Tank. We hear from them. We toss them out of the room. Everybody compares their notes. People have worked with some of the folks and know some folks in one of the companies. And it's quite an interesting and productive operation. We also have a 25-person research team with lots of ex-ARPA-E folks on it. So when you combine all of that expertise, we use that to invest, but you can't just be in our coalition and be a passive investor. We also really lean on our companies to pilot and even scale the innovations that we invest in. They get to know the companies. They give us their opinions about whether we should invest in them. And then we say back to them, well, if you thought it was a good idea and invested, wouldn't it make sense in your system? And that's our way of accelerating things through what you all understand is a very, very slow, understandably slow process of technology adoption in the industry, because we own reliability 24/7, 365. We own resilience now, which is a new responsibility, and we're basically powering the world, all the 17 essential infrastructures that her colleagues point, and all of our bases. Accelerating that takes real work, and this system has really paid off. We have over $3 billion of contracts between our companies, our coalition members, and our companies. So that's kind of our unique view into the innovation space. It's really, really good to see. It's grown a lot. We've been around 8 years now. We've seen it grown quite a lot. Our coalition has grown. But there's still a lot to do. And as a deployment person, I'll say that there is a lot of good technology that still needs to work its way into the broader footprint, whether it's PMUs or lots of other things. So there's lots and lots of good work to do. And I'll add to the Vice Admiral's point, thank you all for the work you're doing, because you folks are in the trenches,
Right.
and we need you.
Yep.
No, thank you.
And I could tell you want to add something.
So what I like about your point of view here is that right now, innovation is a Rorschach word for anything you want it to be, without discipline and focus and some amount of framing. It's kind of, it's a paradox that to do innovation, you need to frame innovation, even though you don't want to do that, because you think about innovation, you think about, no, they have no limits. We do have limits, if we want to be capable. So thank you for that rational point of view, and I'm going to call you when we're done with this. But this is really important, because innovation, I mean, famously, the first person who ate a raw oyster was being innovative about his diet. And so innovation is a human compulsion. We invent, we create, and this innovation thing is really important. I think that part of the reason why we have this now as a common word is the recognition that the world is moving fast, and faster than we are able to keep up in many ways. So what are the lost opportunities? What are the threats? What are the risks? What are the opportunities overall? But we need to move faster, and the processes that bring in from the insurance companies to the government, to everyone else who have responsibility for some sort of order, keep it slowed down a little bit, huh? And so I think that what you're doing here is fantastic. It's adding some diversity of point of view about innovation, but it's also giving it the frame and the focus that we need. And I truly believe that the innovation success, though, is, and I go back to Duke here, because from my background and experience of what I see even today, the human being is really important in this. And the leadership is really important in this. So you heard the previous panel discuss leadership and people, and we can go on about that, but that's really an important piece to all this. Another piece I would say very, very quickly is to innovate with some sanity and some rationality. I would say play the game before the game. And by that, in my world, we talk about wargaming and gaming overall that has a serious intent to understanding the world differently, bringing in a very diverse group who's going to question your assumptions, bring in some new thoughts and some new ways of thinking. That's how we have always innovated in some fashion. But now, if we do it with the purpose that you are talking about, we're going to come to some very interesting collaborative solutions that we had not thought about. So the diversity of point of view is key, but that can become chaotic if it does not have some sort of framing. So I think that what you're doing is just terrific, and I'm going to call you when we're done.
Mariana.
Just to comment on Anne's comment, you mentioned that for innovation, human being is important, leadership is important, and I completely agree with you. I also think that expertise is important,
Yep.
because we're in a situation where our industry has lots of challenges. When there are so many challenges, there are as many or even more opportunities. So we have lots of opportunities, and there is significant funding, whether it's the funding that you mentioned or US DOE funding, but there is currently lots of funding. When there are lots of opportunities and lots of funding, many companies rush into the industry. They might have great ideas, they might not have great ideas, but they're innovative ideas. How to sort it out? Not every innovative idea is a good idea. Not every innovative idea has the right to live. Just because it's innovative and sounds cool, and it may come from companies who are experts in other industries. And I see that in Power Systems, we try to see what other industries are doing. And not everything translates to Power Systems. So I think we need expertise, we need qualified people, and especially in the utilities, who make the decisions which innovation to deploy and which innovation should just remain on the shelf. And that ties into workforce development and having talent, and especially qualified talent, to separate what needs to be done or would potentially bring fruit and what has to be just neglected. And that's, I think, a very big issue now.
I would just,
Go ahead.
I would just add that, you know, when we talk about innovation, really what we're talking about is risk.
Yeah.
And again, you know, utilities are set up to provide reliability and certainty and safety. And so that's where I think the leadership, as we've been talking about, the human component is where leaders and those that work for utilities, how do you get up to that edge of risk-taking? Risk-taking on a personal level within the organization, risk-taking in terms of the technology, risk-taking in terms of the business model, risk-taking within the regulatory complexity that you work within, and how do you push forward? So in California, we've seen a lot of risk-taking in terms of innovation on the policy side that has been, you know, naysayed and then proven that we could get there. So 25% RPS, 33% RPS, now 100% essentially RPS, but clean power. How do we get there? And so policymakers send market signals. Entrepreneurs respond to those market signals. And entrepreneurs, by definition, have to be risk takers to really be able to move forward, iterate, learn, and then pivot and scale. And how do you bring all those players together? And that's really what we've been trying to do, is bring together the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, those within the utilities and organizations that are looking to advance to meet the regulatory requirements, but needing to embrace innovation. And then, of course, we have record funding coming from the federal government, thanks to the Biden administration with the bipartisan infrastructure law, IRA, CHIPS and Science Act. And I'm sure many have just completed or are about to complete grid innovation, grid reliability innovation proposals, or I forget the acronym, GRIP, DOE GRIP. How many people have been part of GRIP proposals in this? So a few people, and you've been probably up late at night getting your GRIP proposals together. The federal government, DOE, is really driving innovation through the funding and seeing how we can get cross-sector collaboration between industries, between utilities, across regulatory requirements or definitions and geographies. And then you add in things like Port of LA and Port of Long Beach here, where we've got the biggest port complex in the United States of America. 40% of the goods come through these two ports. And we're moving. When I was working for the mayor of LA, we got the Port of LA and Long Beach to commit to 100% zero-emission drayage trucks by 2035. That's a lot of load that we're going to need to be able to deliver the charging infrastructure for the battery electric trucks. You know, hydrogen trucks are coming, but they seem to be a little farther away and more tuned for long haul than the short haul drayage trucks. But all these things that require you to work with different stakeholders that you really didn't have to consider before a few years ago. You know, and just EIP's growth over the last 8 years has been phenomenal. We've seen phenomenal growth in the incubator space, and really, how do you marry early stage innovation with mature, complex organizations that have to hit all their marks? And so risk-taking is not a simple thing. So commend everybody in this room for really being a risk-taker, not just an innovator.
Can I take that on another? So great, and I completely agree with you. So we have begun a Naval Innovation Center at NPS, and we're going to build a whole center for the convening of problem solving. But one of the things that the military thinks about is this. First of all, the premise is that when Dwight Eisenhower electrified America, he also did the interstate system. And both of those things, in my view, I'm kind of an Eisenhower student here, is they were all about access. And access is what is not only about that, but it's also oftentimes about what militaries do, especially navies, access to ports and this kind of thing. What's happened today is not only the risk that you take bravely for opportunities and growth, it's the risk you're not thinking about in that. So if access has been an American principle, and it has been, denial becomes the enemy. So we need to understand that there is lots of competition out there. So no matter how innovative we get, somebody is trying to be the counter, or as adaptive as we might become, there is the counter adaptation. Let's take a couple of cases. In Afghanistan and Iraq, the innovation was IEDs. The United States military sought to adapt to that and do the counter innovation, the counter adaptation to not only the IEDs, but then to drones. And then the drones become a whole new thing, a whole new phenomenon for opportunity. So now you have this extraordinary explosion of drones based upon a lot of things, but one of the applications that we saw was the drones in Afghanistan. Roll that tape forward. Ukraine. The lack of innovation for understanding how organizations work, if you look at what the cyber attacks mostly attacked was the gaps in the processes and the organizations of engineers, operators, and their cyber technicians. So they went after the gaps. So as we talk about risk for opportunity for growth, there's also got to be a counter team is red risking. Okay, that is risking in the red, what's going to undo this? Or what is the growth from this that we had not expected? That's really important part of that whole gaming thing. Duke's right, we don't need to model off of computers to teach everything, but that's a start. And then modeling out what might happen is that whole notion about doing some thinking ahead. So access versus denial, application versus the growth of the opportunity for the capability, it's a pretty complex thing. It is complex, and it's about integration, and innovation can be on top of that, around it, inside of it, under it, constantly. That's where the human being comes in, who is the master, the expert of what he or she is doing.
Well, I'm going to use that as a segue to a theme that's come through your comments indirectly, and that is, on the one hand, we think about engineering is about technology, and it's about technical things, and you all have been talking about the human element. And so how much of the innovation process that you guys see is really about human systems, culture, organizational structures, business models, versus the actual widgets, the engineered equipment, and so forth? And if access to the technology opportunities is really enabled or constrained by the people part, as well as pushed by leaders and so forth, like, how much of it is about the people part? This is a bunch of engineers we're talking to. How much of it is about the non-technical stuff?
Well, I think you need both, and I don't accept the framing of like one is more important than the other. You need to get the engineering and the science right, and a lot of times that's very, very hard. It's not just in the lab, but in the field. You all know that. But at the same time, all of our organizations so far are mostly staffed by humans. And culture, our CEO, Hans Kobler, who comes out of Bain Consulting, he says, he has this great phrase, basically culture eats strategy for breakfast. You've probably heard it. It's not original to him. And it's really, really important. And culture, we see this across most of our companies who invest in us have forward-leaning innovation cultures, but even in them, there's lots of conversations about how this particular part of the organization is really very, very aware of the need to adapt new technologies and new processes as load growth takes off and this whole new wave of technologies comes in, and there is a true imperative to decarbonize the industry, and they recognize that they're going to be changing the things they do and what they do for the rest of their careers. And then there's other organizations that they're risk averse. Yeah. Their culture is risk aversion, and it's just hard to get them to change. And so culture is absolutely, absolutely critical, and culture is, people.
You value what you measure, you measure what you value. So when Duke says quarterlies are interesting, but they're not going to get you to where you want to be if you're thinking 5, 10 years from now, that's an interesting thing to manage, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes, but I, being a dismal scientist in part after engineering, I hear that as structuring our whole economic and financial systems to enable long-term investments.
I agree.
And to me, that's sort of a public policy meets economic sector issue. It requires some federal funding with patient capital, and the IRA has been really, really critical in that, and the Infrastructure Act. So there's a huge role for public investment in military, which is military's patient capital in DARPA. Really, you showed us how to do it, and as a result, won several wars that way. But beyond that, we need lots of financial sector instruments that aren't so imprisoned by the quarterly results Duke was talking about, that they can think and act long-term. Yeah. And EIP is one of those vehicles.
Mariana, did you want to say something? Yeah.
I would just agree that the culture of innovation is extremely important. There is no one answer to your question. It depends. It depends on the organization. It depends on the technology, how immediately needed the technology, how much benefit it would potentially provide. And I believe that it all comes down to people or to a person. And there are lots of silos frequently within the utilities, within certain organizations. So when we talk about partnerships, it's partnerships we mentioned across industries and partnerships across various organizations. But sometimes what we need is partnerships within the same organization to make the innovation a reality.
I just want to pick up on Peter's point for a second. I think the tyranny of quarterly returns and the incentives we put on CEOs of publicly listed companies to increase stock price is at odds, of course, with patient long-term results. And that is a challenge. And so when I worked for the mayor of LA, one of the things we did, the mayor did, was put into every general manager of every department, even if it was the police chief, criteria in their annual reviews that was related to sustainability, climate GHG reduction targets, anything that was relevant. And the police department in that case led on the electrification of the city fleet. They led on some other things that were probably not as critical, but important and representative, like they switched from printing their reports single-sided to duplex printing, and the police chief was really proud about it. But how do we put incentives where they need to be? And really how we do that is an important question. At Lacey, we've been thinking about that with our startup founders. We take an equity stake in the form of a warrant. We allow them to earn back part of that warrant over the course of the program if they bake in things that we think make for better companies that aren't just about increasing shareholder value, creating better relationships with the community, better relationships with their employees, of course, advancing environmental sustainability and climate solutions, and putting a financial reward on it. And I think that's really critical. On the other side of people is the talent, the people that we need to work for your companies, for your organizations. And We don't have enough trained, of course. We need more electricians. We know that, number one, as we move to electrify everything. But we also need people who know how to maintain these systems, how to repair them. So we have a company that EIP invested in, one of our startups, called Charger Help. 2 black women from South Los Angeles who saw a problem. They saw the problem that we need to ensure charger reliability. Now, not only have they created a workforce across the country and are building a data set that is going to be really important to the charging industry as well as utilities, but they're really thinking about how they influence policy. And one of the key drivers of 97% uptime in federal funding partially comes from their thought leadership and really getting out there, but also training that workforce, how to maintain microgrids, charging stations, all the things that are really IT or IoT jobs of how are we going to maintain uptime and reliability.
Mariana,
I know we're almost running out of time. We have.
we're going to go a couple minutes over, just saying.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. But I wanted to shift to a slightly different angle. The innovation that we would like to bring to life at various utilities has multiple aspects, and we discussed a few. But one that I don't think we have mentioned so far is affordability. Some of the innovation is extremely expensive. And the result of innovation could also increase the rates. So we have to make sure that the result of our innovation is improved affordability. And any comments on this?
Well, as I said, we have many of our investors are electric utilities. We're very close with the Edison Electric Institute and the conversation in the industry. And I would say among utility CEOs that I talk to, affordability is one of the top 3 issues. I see Sue nodding, coast to coast. And it's becoming a real challenge because of the need to invest in decarbonization, in load growth, and all of those things. So innovation plays a really key role in bringing down the cost of the things that we have to do. Scale also plays a big role. And that's why we need to invent a lot of technologies and scale them so they come down the cost curve. But affordability is going to be, I think, a challenge for the next decade with us.
Well, you see the Biden administration really putting a lot of dollars and signals out there to how do we optimize the transmission system because it takes so long and it's so expensive to build new transmission lines. So that's, I think, a response to partially affordability, but also cost of time, let alone money. But I think that it's a critical thing. And just one small example, this is fairly anecdotal, but we did a pilot with the Public Housing Authority City of Los Angeles. They wanted to provide an amenity to their residents who lack adequate transportation. So in that case, we did an EV car share program with a company that had been providing EVs at luxury apartments and condos. And so their pivot was nothing radical. It was a business model pivot and really seeing how they could deliver their service at an affordable price. So we need to think about affordability and overall cost to customers, of course, but also affordability to those that are most vulnerable in our society who need solutions and access to solutions the most and benefit from cleaner air and reduction in GHGs and dealing with climate, reducing climate risk, which impact our most vulnerable, lowest income communities, of course, most of all. But in this case, the business model innovation was how do we use direct public subsidy to make that price affordable, not over-subsidize it, but get it to the right place, and then how do we scale it? So now we have state and federal legislation to look to scale that because at higher utilization at the Public Housing Authority than any other location that they deployed their cars. So it takes many forms, but affordability is critical, but how do we get it attenuated just right?
If it isn't affordable, it is not sustainable that we will move toward a decarbonized energy future, that's for sure. Let me ask you just one silly question here at the end. And that is, we have a built environment of the grid. It's decades and decades and decades old in some circumstances. There are retirements of assets, of course. the built environment of buildings and the transportation system that was built on the gasoline and diesel is, it's pretty sticky. And so as you think about innovation with this legacy system around, what are some of the, what's your most exciting thing that you're working on that enables a change on top of the legacy system that's really a great opportunity? Okay, I know somebody asked this in the prior panel and they were stuck, but you guys, Peter.
Well, I'm going to get in trouble because we have 100 companies and all of the innovations.
All of your
Pick your
babies
favorite
are the
child.
best.
They're all my favorite children, and they're all our CEO's favorites. And but I'll mention one area of technology that's really, really exploding now in both technology development and deployment, and that's heat pumps, which I thought of them as sort of a little backwater that it's been around for a long. I mean, I've had a PTAC in my my little office room for decades. But no, the technology for both residential heat pumps, which are getting AI enabled and much more efficient and incredibly good in cold climates. I had a cold air blower in my apartment in Boston in the 1980s, and I was cold. They're so much better now. But we have a company called Atmos Zero that's making like 700 degree C heat pumps for industrial decarbonization. Who knew? Not me. Comes out of ARPA-E. So that's just one area where the technological development and its movement. Who can believe that there were more heat pumps sold than residential furnaces last year in the United States? In the United States. So that's one area that I think helps us in built environment, which is very hard, and also in industrial decarbonization.
Thanks.
So I have two answers on that one. One is purely kind of a provocative. It's pretty exciting to think about the fact that in 30 years we're going to have some sort of energy on the moon because they're going to be mining. So what happens with the moon? And what happens and how does that affect how we understand the Earth? So that's kind of one of my fantasies.
I bet you didn't see that coming.
Yeah, you did. But on a serious note, what is really exciting is, all of the cool stuff that comes up and is invented, created, and is an innovation product. But that comes because people are talking to each other, they're thinking, they are expert, they understand the world. I think that young folks today understand the world in their own way, and that's happened at every single generation, by the way. And it's at a speed and at its own simplicity that is not bad. It's all good. And then there is the older, more seasoned generation who has some experience, so the knowledge base of both, coming together in democratic forms to really contribute to the better world. We are at that point. If we could just get rid of the dysfunction, we would be really at that point. So it's about knowledge and education and application of the best of the human spirit toward creativity. We are there, and that is encouraging to me.
Thank you. Mariana. It'll come on, I think.
My excitement is on Earth. So there are quite a few technologies that we're building on top of the existing systems. And I think I'll mention just a few. One is a great example of using the legacy infrastructure to build innovation, and that is state estimation, which is the foundation of everything that we do, whether transmission system or distribution system. For decades, we have used SCADA data and ran nonlinear state estimation. As I mentioned, we now have PMUs coming in. That's a new technology, or synchrophasers, or synchronized measurements. There are not enough data points right now to run purely estimation on that technology. So we run hybrid estimation, but the key is that incorporates old and new technologies, but the key here is to have it scalable. As we see new sensors and in a much bigger scale, the tools and the algorithms continue to work seamlessly. So that's number one.
Okay, you only get two.
Oh, boy. Then I'll take cascading outages, because I think it's one of the key issues, and the more IBR penetration we have, we talk about inertia, we're talking about events happening much faster, grid becoming more dynamic, and potentially blackouts caused by cascading outages could come more frequently and be more severe. So actually linking this with artificial intelligence is something I'm working on right now, and I can't wait for this innovation to be implemented in the utility or utilities.
That's great. Now, before Matt, Peter, you wanted to add one thing.
I just wanted to add another company, Infravision, that I'm really excited about. Vice Admiral Rondeau mentioned drones and all their applications. Of course, you can use drones to string transmission lines, and that's what this company's done. Came out of Australia. I hope they're here today, and if they are, raise your hand. But take a look at them. Really, really great technology for avoiding helicopters and the armada of trucks that has to follow the line down the corridor. So it's great innovation.
Yeah, it's huge, yeah.
One plug, we had Delphi, one of our startups that's doing wildfire detection, remote wildfire detection downstairs in the exhibitor space, so please go say hi to Gilberto. Two things. One is workforce. I've been in this space for 30 plus years, and in addition to technology and policy, you talk about the hearts and minds and behavioral shifts that need to accompany this transformation we're talking about. And seeing the workforce graduates and hearing them come out of when they get information about electric vehicles and charging, building energy management systems, microgrids, they come out with enthusiasm and a sense of possibility that for grizzled veterans makes you hopeful again. And that's something I'm really excited about. The other is really the integration of not only getting the DERs in place, solar, battery storage, charging, all working together. Of course, can it island, and can it do things that we really perform on demand response? And of course, really, the virtual power plant concept, whatever you want to call it, how do you coordinate those DERs behind the meter and really make them work to deliver the results that are needed? And there's a lot that's going to be required. We're seeing a lot of money, a lot of innovation on the startup side, policy, business models, utilities. So those are the two things I'm really excited about.
Well, before I send you off, I'm just going to say one more thing, and this is to the younger people in the room. I've had the good fortune to be in a job that I have loved for, I guess, almost 5 decades. And the reason that I love it is that it's like a simultaneous equation going on all the time that we're missing a lot. But you have to get the engineering right, and if you don't, it screws it up. You have to get the law right, and if you don't, it screws it up. If you don't get the politics right, it's going to screw it up. And of course, the environmental externality problem, the equity issues, it's a simultaneous equation that is so interesting and so important. So lean into the integration across those different disciplines, because we need your help on all of this. And with that, hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.